Hey, welcome to the Change Podcast. My name's Brent. I'm your host, and I have the incredible privilege of being here with my friend Jay. You all are about to be blessed with this episode. I can assure you that. Jay, thank you for being here with us.
Hey,
Welcome.
thanks for having me, Brent. Excited to be in the podcast with you to talk about all things encountering change.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we get started, I'm sure you're probably going to talk about your background. So, I'm just going to go ahead and ask you the question I ask everyone when they come onto the show. So, what was your encounter with Jesus that left you changed? And we'll go from there.
Sure. Growing up, I went to church all my life, which did not mean that when you go into the garage, you come out as a car, in the same way that going to church doesn't make me a Christian, if that makes sense. So I went to church all my life, born and raised in the church. My parents were very devout Christians. My dad was an elder. My mom was a deacon, and they were involved with the choir. But kind of going through the motion was I didn't really adopt my parents' faith, if that makes sense. I actually was a skeptic and would try to contest God and scriptures and all these things that I was experiencing. And I was on a journey to actually disprove God. That's the rebel that I am. And in that journey, I found that God could be true. So my parents actually sent me to a student conference in Long Island, New York, in my last year of high school. I think their goal was to reform me, that I would come to an encounter with God. My goal was to go have fun with my friends and play lots of volleyball and skip all the events and actually disprove God. So we had different agendas. So going there, I did what I achieved or was setting up to achieve, which is playing tons of volleyball with my friend, going to New York, which is, an exciting city coming from Toronto, and never being outside of my comfort zone and never being outside of the city or country or traveling. It was just like a vacation for me. on the last day of the conference, the student leader literally dragged me by the ear, saying, "I let you off the hook the entire week, and you went off to go and play and with your buddies, but you know tonight's the last night before the conference ends, and so I want you to come to this last talk or last seminar or whatever they called it." And I was like, I played all my volleyball. I had all my fun, so I really have nothing to lose and nothing to gain. That was my attitude, a very poor one at that. And when I heard the student leader talking, she was a PK. We affectionately know that as pastors' kids. And she was basically talking about how she really did not like her dad, who was a pastor. And she prayed to God that he would not be able to come on this family vacation. And her prayer was granted because he was too busy because one of the guest speakers got sick and he had to go preach. And so she was happy that her two sisters and mom went to Virginia Beach. Long story short, she was swimming in the ocean and she wasn't a strong swimmer, and a riptide took her into the current and she was drowning. And she basically was going under the water and losing her consciousness. But before she did that, she made a prayer to God. And sometimes we do this. We kind of spray and pray and hope for the best. And she said, "If you save me, God, like literally save me from drowning, I will devote and commit my life to you." And she woke up and it looked like, she said, it was a tall, dark, handsome man with blonde hair and blue eyes was kissing her. And so she said, "Clearly I'm in heaven and an angel of God is kissing me. So my dreams and prayer have come true." But what she didn't realize was there was an off-duty lifeguard that saw what was happening, went there and saved her life and was giving her
Wow.
mouth-to-mouth CPR. And so she devoted her life to God and she became a campus minister or campus leader, and she was sharing her story, which when I was in church, it was kind of like I hear these boring sermons, and my goal was because they were putting me to sleep and they had a monotone voice, and I might have made a vow at the time. I'm like, I never want to be or sound that boring ever in my life. I would hide behind the biggest hair or the biggest head and situate myself, and then I would sleep for an hour every single Sunday. That was my church experience. And so she was talking in a story format, a narrative format, which was not only interesting, but it caught my attention. It was captivating. It was riveting. It showed me that she was saying that, being good is not good enough. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And going to church doesn't mean that you're going to become a Christian. I'm like, that's me too. And so she says, God's standard is perfection. And I'm like, that's not me. And he says, but he is perfect, and he can make a way through the great exchange through his son, that when you believe in him, he can make a way for you. And I was like, okay, that makes perfect sense. So she articulated something that I believe my experience with the church and the sermons did not articulate well. And I was fighting because I'm a rebel. So I'm like, I don't really want to give in, because if I give in to God and his plea and become a Christian, that's going to make me weak. I'm going to be a loser. This is a down sell, you know. So I thought about this, and as I was wrestling with God, and you look in the scriptures, God always wins, right? So um, it's what we call, there's three persons of God: God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And I felt like God was tugging at my heart and saying, just let go and let me come into your life and show you a better way. And so I basically, long story short, kind of gave up the fight and said, you know what, we'll try this for a bit. It's like maybe we'll do a 7-day trial, and then I want my money back kind of a thing. And so I was like, and then basically I was an introvert because I was the youngest of three boys, and I didn't have a voice or identity or confidence, and I couldn't protect myself or others. That was my upbringing, from a Korean immigrant background. And the Holy Spirit, the third person of God, just filled me that day when I decided to let go and give up and accept God into my life. And ironically, and in God's humor, he transformed me in pretty much instantaneously from introvert to an extrovert, to a person who had no identity, with a person who had a strong identity and had unshakable confidence. So on August 22nd, in my last year of high school in Long Island, New York, I encountered Jesus, and he radically transformed my life from being an introvert to an extrovert, from being someone who didn't know how to talk and or sell to becoming a 7-figure sales ninja. So there's the intro.
Wow. Wow, that's really wild. I know we've had the chance to catch up and talk a little bit, so I do know more of the story, but for the sake of for our listeners, I'd love for you to go into, what you did with this transformation, how have you walked that out? I know you walked me through a lot of different things. We spoke yesterday,
Yeah.
and it's just fascinating what God can do in instantaneously, and would love for you to walk people through that.
Yeah, sure. So after that encounter with God, my being a Korean Canadian immigrant, my parents, pushed me very, very hard. When you get like 98% on a math exam, you would think that they would pat you on the back or say, great job. But they're like, where's the 2%? Right. And I'm just like, you can never please my parents, right? And they meant well, because they came from, a background where they had to come to Canada, learn a different language that they weren't familiar with, had no friends, had no money, and had to work 2-3 jobs in factories, assembly work, variety stores. The going joke for Korean Canadian immigrants, 40 years ago, is any place in the world where you find a corner, you will find a Korean, because they own corner stores or convenience stores, right? Or laundromats or dry cleaners, right? Because they're willing to do the work that other people aren't. So growing up, we grew up kind of poor. We were the kind of people that were shopping at the bargain places, getting the bargain shoes, the bargain clothes. So, grew up with a very much of a poverty, scarcity mindset as immigrants. And nothing was ever handed on a platter. There was never any freebies. So my parents were working, 12, 15 hours a day. My mom was a nurse, because she got re-educated, went back to school, even though she had already had a full scholarship in Korea, was working as a nurse for years. They had to come back and re-educate, learn a language, study in a language that they didn't understand, go back to school. My dad was an animal scientist. His claim to fame was helping invent cottage cheese, which is really cool. Anyway, so they both ended up going to school and ended up getting jobs and working very hard. So growing up, walking out this encounter with God was very difficult, because when you have a poverty mindset, which is the opposite of God, which is an abundant mindset, it's really hard to see that transformation actualized, because my wiring and my upbringing was completely opposite of the biblical framework or the gospel, which is, a life that is abundant, John 10:10. I've come to give you life and life abundant, life eternal, life abundant, which is a great opportunity for people to understand that there is a way and we can have a life that's completely fulfilled. But I wasn't living that out. So how did I walk out that change? Is I had to read God's word, which is, the Bible. And I had a voracious appetite. I'm like black and white. I don't like grays. So I was reading this thing, the Bible every single day. I was praying. I was experiencing God. And back to, my parents and my upbringing, they had really pushed hard in athletics and sports and music. So I learned the piano, and this is my keyboard. I was a worship pastor for 5 years, music director, worship leader. I played for 25 plus years, went to the highest level of what we call Royal Conservatory music. It's basically just below becoming a concert pianist, if that makes sense. So I practiced 3 hours a day. And then, Malcolm Gladwell talks about the outliers principle. How do you get really, really good or become the best? You practice a lot until it becomes that you can't get it wrong. So walking that out, my faith was easily expressed through music. And so worship, which is what we call a musical expression of our love for God, became a huge thing. So I poured myself into music, was recording, I was composing, I was making songs, and really heavily involved in my church with the music portion. That really helped shape my faith and walk out that change in ways that my words were still catching them as a former introvert. And then from there, I went from graduating from university. My parents had a prophecy for all three of their children, three boys, to become one of three things: a doctor, dentist, or a lawyer. A doctor, dentist, lawyer. And so I did science because my parents wanted me to do that, but I hated it. So it was kind of incongruent to where I felt like I was wired and where God was leading me. But I did it because I wanted to be a good, obedient Korean kid, honoring my parents. But after going from there, I ended up in the banking industry for the largest bank here in Canada, and ended up growing up the ladder. It's interesting that even while I was walking out my faith, I had a desire to start I think it was called a Bible study prayer group. We ended up having, I could have lost my job because there was 70,000 employees. There's a lot of red tape. There's things that you can and cannot do. And I started this is the start and beginning of how I walked out that change in the corporate world. And so I started a lunch Bible study prayer with people that were not of faith and people that were of faith. So we had about a dozen people that were meeting every single week. And we saw people cured from cancer. We saw people's, lives change. We saw people coming to know who God was, et cetera, et cetera. And we were basically just, bringing a bagged lunch and studying the Bible and praying together. And one story of many, and I'll pause there for you to interact, because we had an executive vice president come into the boardroom where we were meeting to pray and read the Bible. And he stepped in, and we were in the middle of, I think it was prayer. And he's like, "I'm sorry, I must have walked into the wrong world." Because, we're on the 40th floor of the central, brain of Toronto in the financial district. And these are for board meetings for executives. And here we are praying. And he's like, "I must have stepped out into a different portal," right? And so, long story short, we could have lost our job, but God really used that to bring people to Him and really elevate even my career. And there's more to that, from banking to pastoring to sales. But I'll leave this.
No, I mean, it's just great because, you start living out of faith and not living out of fear. After some kind of conversion, typically what ends up happening is that it manifests in different ways. And then clearly in this case, you just don't even think about losing your job. You're just like, I'm going to organize people for the kingdom and growing the kingdom and moving from there. Yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, so at this stage, you're, climbing the corporate ladder, and, you're in, basically leading the Bible studies in your career. you're a you're a worship leader, worship pastor at this time? I'm just trying to like connect the dots here. So that's what's going on. So then what happens over the course of the next year, 2, 3?
Yeah. So, so chronologically, I went from the banking industry, was climbing the corporate ladder. I went on missions for a month, and the bank sponsored me. So it's interesting. They gave me money. They gave me clothes to give, like bank clothes. They gave me mugs. So while I was going on mission with my church, they were funding the mission because they thought this is a great opportunity. I left work for an entire month, right? And I did it on without a leave of absence, if that makes sense. I wasn't getting paid, and they thought that was no one
Yeah,
has
that's
ever done
unheard
that.
of.
It's unheard of
Like you don't hear of that happening. Yeah.
ever. And they were paying the way, which is amazing. I came back and then they asked me to do it's like a lunch learn for all the executives and the staff. We do a monthly rewards and recognition. So they brought me up to the highest place. It was like the 40th floor. It was the executive boardroom for the CEOs, CFOs, all the top people. So you had all the top leaders of the bank there, and they asked me to give like a 15-minute presentation so that they can say this is what we did to fund Jay's trip, and the bank, made the way. So I gave this presentation with a lot of fear, but a lot of faith, and I had an executive vice president of card services for this bank, the largest bank in the nation, send me a personal message saying that was the best presentation I've ever heard, and your heart, young man, is something that I'd never seen in my life. Long story short, the VP gave me a $10,000 raise, and with my bonuses and my stock options, I was able to buy a house. and and
That's amazing.
this is a time when we had friends who were like 10 years ahead of us, and they're renting apartments. They're like, how did you afford a house? You literally, and I just got married. So we actually, once we got married and we had a brand new home, we moved from the wedding day into our brand new home. So that's what happened from the banking. And then I got a message from God through a cartoon. I love cartoons. I love pictures. Um, I'm not really a good student, but I love learning. And so I saw this caption I was on the 29th floor of the head office of the largest bank. And I saw on my colleague's cubicle pinned a cartoon caption. It was two captions, and one of them was, I think, 2650 AD, the future. The first caption was archaeologists mining ruins, right, with like a hammer or axe pick. Under their second caption, they found under the rubble, they found cubicles, and the actual cartoon was pinned on a cubicle with 70,000 employees. And my heart just dropped and my spirit sank. And I felt like God was saying to me, you're doing a great job and I'm advancing you in your career. Clearly, you can see that I'm with you. And whatever you do, I will be with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Hebrews 13:5. And I heard that, not audibly, but I heard it in my spirit. And I felt like he was saying, you are helping people drive profit for a large company, which is excellent. But I want you to drive profit in people's hearts so they can experience health in their marriages, health in their finances, health in their spiritual well-being. And so I felt like God was calling me out of the workplace, which is the exact opposite what my parents wanted. Because I wasn't a dentist, doctor, or lawyer, but I was a banker and I was making good coin. And so them bending over backwards and breaking their backs to help provide a better education and life was, okay, he didn't do what we asked, but at least he's got a decent job. So just stay, never leave. And now I have God saying, okay, you did a good work, you're obedient. Now I want you to leave and not stay. So now I have issues because now it says, because honor your parents, your mother and father.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
but that's a 10 commandments. So how do I, who do I listen to? Do I listen to the boss upstairs, which is God, the one who made the commandment? Or do I listen to his commandment, which is honor your parents? Because if I honor my parents, then I'm not leaving this workplace. So
Yeah, totally.
my parents worked their tail offs for 25, 30 years from the bottom up. Now they have a 5-bedroom, 3,200 square foot home. My dad just bought a brand new Mercedes SUV, and my mom bought a brand new Volvo. We are in my mom's brand new Volvo, and we are driving into the cemetery where my grandmother passed away. And if you've ever seen Korean dramas, it was like a Korean drama playing in slow motion. It was raining. We were in a brand new Volvo. We were going to see my grandma's cemetery. And I was about to break the news to my mom that I was going to leave the bank and disobey my parents' dreams and wishes. And you could hear the music in the backdrop, the rain falling extra slowly in HD. And I said to my mom, I don't know how to break this to you. And I know this is going to be difficult, but I am going to leave the bank and I'm going to pursue full-time ministry by going to seminary and doing my master's and become a pastor. And she was speechless. And long story short, she said, well, I don't feel that that's where God's calling you. And I don't know if I can bless that. So as close as you can get to being cutting off from the family, relationally and financially, that's kind of what happened. And my heart just broke. My spirit just sank. And I went to the largest seminary to do my Master of Divinity for 4 years in missional leadership. I was a worship pastor, music director for 5 years, and then I planted or helped plant 10 churches from there in 10 years. And then 3 years later into my ministry of pastoring and church planting, my dad, who was a typical Korean father, very stoic, very kind of like, performance driven. He calls me into the kitchen. And when your dad calls you, I don't know about you, but when my dad calls me, I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble. And so he's like, son, come to the kitchen. I want to talk with you. I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble again. And so I go to the kitchen and I'm sitting across the table from him. And he says this, son, when you went into ministry and you left the banking world, we were very displeased with you. But now that we see how God is using you, I want to let you know that we had desires for you, but they were not in aligned with God's will. And I want to say to you as a father that I want to apologize to you for making a mistake in trying to push my agenda on you instead of hearing God's voice. And what you did was right. And the way that you are impacting and transforming lives and bringing people to faith in Jesus is a heart that is beyond me, my understanding, and even beyond my capability. And I'm so proud of you. And if you ever understand Korean father-son dynamics, that doesn't happen not only for a lifetime, but for generations. And something broke inside that says, God, you are pleased with me and I'm on the right track.
Wow. That is amazing. I actually have a handful of friends that the Korean descent, and I just know a little bit about family dynamic, and that is incredible. That's well, number one, I'm so happy to hear that, because we didn't get this deep into your story the last time we spoke, but this is really awesome. And it just goes to show that God obviously was with you, but it's just, he's like giving you like pats on the back along the way, being like, hey, hold your head up high. Like you're obedient and you're in my will and you're moving forward, and I'm going to go before you and I'm going to prepare the way. And it's just awesome to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you're in this space where now you've gotten affirmation from your father. What happens now? Like what happened, now it's like you're in the space and you're walking this out, and you're obviously walking in obedience. Where do you go from here?
So that's a great question. When you're aligned with God and when you're honoring your parents, there's like a double blessing there. Let's just say that from that point on, the ministry that I was doing and pastoring, it exploded. It literally just exponentially grew. And I think there's an alignment in our spirit and in our hearts and in our minds that says, you can even think, when you said you started all these, multi-million-dollar businesses, 5, 6 businesses and counting, that in a situation in a marriage, if your wife is not on board, even though you're capable and competent and you're called, it makes it very difficult. But when your spouse or partner or wife or husband, whichever way you look at it, is on board and say, hey, babes, we don't have the money, but I'm willing to support you because I believe in you, that kind of a thing. That as a father, as a man, as a husband, you can literally, once you get that support, you can literally walk through brick walls, right? Break down new ground. You can pioneer. And so when my parents were for me when I felt like God was already for me and not leaving me, but he was paving the way. From that point on, you know, I put together an evangelism curriculum from seminary, and the church that I was serving as a worship pastor grew from 100 to 800 in 3.5 years. We had
Wow.
trained over 250 people. We had 25 students getting trained in 2 classrooms simultaneously every quarter. And we had about 7 teams going out and doing outreach every single week. So we had like over thousands of people coming to Christ. But in terms of the number of people that came to our church after that was about 800-ish. So we went from 1 to 5 campuses, and then over the next 10 years, instead of 250 people trained, I helped train 2,500 people. And over 40,000 conversations later, we had recorded professions of faith of 10,000 or more people.
Wow. That's
So
incredible.
success leaves clues, I guess, and we call it
Yeah.
fruitfulness in the ministry, right?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. No, that's awesome. So because I know a little bit about, like what you're doing now and whatnot, you're not in the ministry anymore, but that's okay because you're following obedience and other things. Can you just kind of bring people to current day, present day, and what transpired in this illustrious ministry career to what you're doing now, which is equally as awesome. You're still helping people, but just in a different capacity. What happened there?
Yeah, the transition was in ministry because I couldn't be everywhere at all times. I got really good at working myself out of a job. So I was a judo master. Do you do this? Do you do that? That was my pastoral joke. And so basically, because I couldn't be everywhere, I basically empowered and trained people to do the work that I couldn't do myself. And so in ministry, because I was working myself out of a job, I was a regional evangelist for all of Canada. And so I was traveling from Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, and training all the pastors, church planters, campus ministers, leaders. And because I was going out and doing OJT, on the job training, which I would go into campuses, I would go into downtown, I would go into the coffee shops, I would train people, and then I would leave them with a training curriculum. I would give them worksheets. They had classes that they were running themselves. They were all running themselves and self-sustaining. And so because I was on ministry partnership development, which basically means fundraising for a pastor and raising my own salary, because I was working myself out of a job and I didn't realize I was doing such a good job, my missionary funds started going down because they're like, everything's in place now. And the support went down to about $1,000 a month. And living in Toronto, Canada, where the average home is $1.3 million, it was unsustainable. So I did what I thought was the brightest idea that I could think of at the time. So I did a newspaper route for my neighborhood, and I made an additional $100 a month. So I brought my salary up from $1,000 to a whopping $1,100 a month. And I had my kids who were babies at the time in the wagon, and I'm like, I still can't make ends meet. So I saw an ad, I think it was on Facebook, and there was a gentleman who was a business growth consultant. He was driving a green Lamborghini, and he was in a power suit. And I'm like, oh, wow, this guy's making a lot of money. So I thought, if I can learn how to do what he's doing, then maybe I can, supplement my $1,100 income a month. So I did what no one did at that time. I sent a video personalized message. And if you were that guy in the Lamborghini, which, I'm sure you could be with the business that you're running, they'd be like, hey, Brent, my name is Jay. I'm a pastor, and there is no reason why you would even want to care or listen to what I'm saying. And it's not like you're even putting a job, posting anywhere. But I see that you're doing some great work with your businesses and the clients that you're working with. And whatever it takes to learn and to help you with things that you hate doing, I would love to work for free for you and be your right-hand man and help you continue in your incredible success. Would you be wildly opposed to connecting? And I sent like a 60-second, 90-second video.
Wow. Yeah, you get a response.
I got a response within 45 minutes, and he got on a Zoom call, and he's like, what on earth would cause you to reach out to me? Because I don't have any jobs for you, and I don't even have time for you. and you're a pastor, you know nothing. And I'm like,
Sure. Wow.
you're like, you're right. I don't know anything. But once I learn things, I can master things and I can help you do stuff that you hate doing and you don't need to pay me. So what do you have to lose? And so he's like, okay, this was a Sunday. And he's like, and I didn't realize he was downtown Toronto. I guess the Facebook ads targeted me well. I thought he was in the States. He goes, come downtown to my penthouse and, you can like be my understudy. You can job shadow me, right? And then I'll give you some tasks and we'll go from there. So I'm leaving the next morning and, I'm going downtown and my wife is like, where are you going? And what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm going to a guy who drives a Lambo and he's apparently a very successful business consultant or coach. And I'm going to work for him for free. And she's like, do you know him? I'm like, well, I talked to him yesterday. I saw him on a Facebook ad. She goes, that sounds really sketchy. And I said, well, let's say if I don't come back within 8 hours, you can put on my tombstones 2 words. And those 2 words would be loved much. Loved much. Because I don't know if I'm going to come back in one piece or if I'm going to be dismembered and thrown to Lake Ontario. Like, I have no idea. I'm just trusting God. And so I go there, and this gentleman is wearing looks like a Hugh Hefner bathrobe, and he's wearing no socks, and he's wearing Gucci leather dress shoes. And I'm like, he's like, here, so come into my penthouse. And I'm like, I'm so confused. I'm like, God, protect me. God, Lord, help me, please, Lord. Like, is this from you or is this from the devil, right? And I'm like, is this Satan himself? It manifested in the flesh. Anyways, I'm so confused and I'm scared, right? And we go, he literally owns like the entire penthouse in downtown Toronto, right? So I'm like, okay, clearly he's doing quite well. And then he was legit. I was his understudy for like 3 months straight. And then he's like, I was like, you know what? Your business, I can see your ticket price becoming, 50 times more. Like your premium ticket price can be increased by 50 times. And I said, in my mind, as a prophetic guy and as a futuristic guy, I see 3 packages that are $15,000, $36,000, and $50,000. And it was a lot less than that. And he's like, you don't know anything. How would you even say that? And so he was running paid ads. He says, let me throw a paid ad and just, once you put that offer together and try to pitch someone and you fail, I can tell you that it didn't work. And I can prove to you that it was not a good idea. So he was willing to throw a paid ad in my direction. I never had done sales. I don't understand the business. And I get on a call with 3 CEOs, CFOs, CTOs from UK, England. And I throw this offer, slap together a slide deck together. And I said, so that will be $50,000 to help you do a done for you VSL funnel and run paid ads to help you grow your leads to increase your sales, because you guys are already closing at 40%. So once we get leads to your calendar, you're going to be making that money back in the first month. And I'm thinking, and they're like, that's exactly what we're looking for. So how do we pay you? And I honestly inside said, I wasn't expecting you to say yes. And they said, we don't have a credit card that has that limit. So how do we pay you? And I'm like, I'm not sure. They said, do you take a wire transfer? I'm like, maybe. So I went back to Slack and I said, give me your Swift number, Swift code, your transit number.
Oh,
and then
my goodness.
$50,000 came into the Slack channel and it says boom shakalaka. And all the salespeople were like, who on earth shut the front door? Who just closed a $50,000 cash collected deal? And I started doing that 2-3 times a week, a month, and closing 6 figures a month right out the gate. And since then, I've helped close for a lot of different 7-8 figure coaches that are, you may be familiar with, and took them from $15,000 months to $150,000 months, took them from $100,000 months to $1 million months. So that's the short version of what I've been able to do with the gifting that God humorously gave to me as a former introvert, now an extrovert, and someone who had no voice, who was speaking on stages in front of hundreds and thousands of people.
It's awesome. So you have this this journey where you had things, and I briefly shared with you, we've gone through stuff in our childhood, right? That
Yeah.
where we had some wounds from, and God has just in his mercy just come in and rescued us, right? And then has done some really incredible things amidst our journey, and how much, we probably tried to run away from him. At least let me say that for myself, because I was running
Mm,
from from what I thought, a life trying to pursue Jesus would be like. And then I just started to realize more and more and more as time went on that I didn't want to run.
mm,
And then eventually got to the point to where I actually had this longing to get back into right relationship. And so now it's like you have this awesome story about how you were trying to disprove, and then all of a sudden, you get this incredible evangelistic message from this young lady that was basically sharing her testimony. And then you get infilled but with the Holy Spirit, and then you become an extrovert when you were an introvert, and then you totally didn't like anything dealing with people. And then now you're doing all the things that you're doing, and along the lines, 40,000 evangelistic, conversations, 10,000 professions of faith, started 10 churches,
yeah.
tons, all this stuff. And then now it's like you're working in the business marketplace,
Hmm.
and you're helping businesses, and you're using these gifting and talents that God's given you. And then also sharing your faith along the way. I think that that's pretty awesome. Let's do this, because I would really like, if there's any kind of closing remarks that you would have to encourage somebody that's, maybe in um, my who we really like to go for, who I'm really trying to reach is who I was for 15 years.
Mm,
I was in church idolizing my calendar, idolizing money, idolizing my businesses. It's not wrong to make money. It's not wrong to be a business owner. I mean, we do those things, but how do we put God first? Like, how would you encourage somebody that maybe is thinking that, oh, I'm too busy to really go after God?
mm.
What would you say to them, Jay? Like, how would you instruct somebody to like bring it around, and not run from God or run from relationship, but to run to God, run to relationship, so that God can just show you that abundant life that you talked about earlier in the episode?
Yeah, amazing. So, a couple of remarks I'm actually picking up and connecting dots from before that I missed. I do believe that there's a ministry and there's a marketplace, and our faith is seamless. So even though I'm no longer quote unquote, a full-time pastor, my ministry has not ever left. I look at ministry and marketplace and our faith as a seamless integration of our life. That's what the life abundant, life eternal is. So I have actually equally, if not the same, if not more opportunities to share my faith. And I just literally prayed for a potential client right before this call to help them grow and scale their business. So I get to serve them as a servant leader. So in the closing remark, as you mentioned, with reaching who you were and your target market, the whole idea is I wasn't running from God like you were. I was kicking and screaming. I'm the biggest skeptic. I'm like, I want to disprove God. I'm like, I'm not even running away from God. I'm gonna show that God is not real. And at the end of this journey, and you look at all these great scholars and academics and people that try to disprove God through validity of scriptures, through historicity, through validity of the scrolls, and time, and the all all these different evidences, if you will, and eyewitnesses. At the end of my search of someone who's trying to disprove God, and not just running from God, but kicking and screaming into relationship with God, I found that God was not only true, but he's also personal. And something that I cannot um, negate is the experience I have with my relationship with God, and what I felt on that day of my last year of high school, when God, and when I kind of dropped my guard, and gave permission to give God to come into my life, is um, I cannot negate the experience I have with God, even decades after. I'm not saying it makes life easier. I'm not saying it's a life of roses. I'm saying that in some ways it's actually harder to live out of faith in the marketplace. But instead of running from God and running to God, I want to encourage all those people who are listening, and the whole church taboo, because I come from the church and the ministry of the church, and the pastor role is, there's nothing wrong with money. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil, right? It's okay to make a lot of
That's
money.
right.
It's okay to make a lot of
Yeah.
money. My whole mantra as a sales ninja is to sell more so I can give more, right? And we just put my wife was an accountant, just gave a very substantial amount to our church in tithes. And we've given more in the last year than we have in our entire lives collectively because we're able to. So before things took off with business and before things, really started getting traction, my wife said something really interesting. And gentlemen, please listen to me with a heart of, openness. The head of the household may be the husband, but the wife is the neck that turns the head. Right? There's a reason why God gave us a partner, our better half. So my wife said to me one day when I was trying to really grind and grow, and I think my priorities to making money was idolized, like you, like I was in the
Yeah.
wrong place in the wrong space. And she said something so interesting. She says choice words in the right season. She said, honey, the reason why I think God is not allowing you to grow in this business is because your heart's not in the right place and you're not ready for growth.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
That's good.
man, you're supposed to say nice things to me. You're supposed to encourage me. You're supposed to support me so I can go through that brick wall. But you're saying the exact opposite. You're going against what I want you to say. So can you say that differently in a way that I want to hear it? And she's like, no, I'm hearing that again. And so I had to get on my face. Instead of running from God, instead of kicking and screaming, I literally got on my knees on my face and I fell uh, uh, before God, and I submitted like I did when I came to Christ. I said, like, I know nothing. You can take anything and everything away from me, and regardless if I do this, if you want me to do something else, just 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 say what you want to do. I want to be completely open to what your will is. If you want me to stop this right now, get it's fine. I don't like it. I don't want to, but if you want me to stop it, I will stop it. So putting God first is not an option because when I don't put God first, nothing good happens in my life. And for me, it's like oxygen. In order for me to breathe, God is more than my oxygen. And for Him to help me navigate not only my life, my marriage, my parenting, my family, and helping my clients, I need His input in my life in every area so that I say, three words: Holy Spirit is one, I guess. What next? I always try to ask and inquire and include so that I can participate in His perfect plan in every single decision.
That's good. It's so good. And it's not that it gets easier right away once you make that declaration or you put your idol on the altar and sacrifice it or whatever. I mean, it doesn't get easier right away. Sometimes it's really hard,
Yeah.
and it gets really hard, and it can sometimes, hurt. But I think, and Jay, I think you'd agree with this. What we've probably found in this transition is that when you do that, God gives you something way better in all cases. Um, with that, here's what we'll do in conclusion. I know that some of y'all listen to this, you're going to be like, man, Jay's a cool guy. I want to go and learn more about Jay. Jay's sending me some of his social handles and bio and all that. I will include that in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Jay, it will be there. And with that, Jay, we just thank you so much for being on the show today. And with that, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Any other closing salutations, Jay?
Yeah, I think when we can have faith with actions, because the opposite is sales without faith is dead, but faith with actions, which is hearing the voice of God, hear the whispers, heed the call, and taking that massive imperfect action based on the faith that God gives and gifts you, is when you're faithful with little, He'll entrust you with much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. Hey,
Thank you for
everybody.
having me.
Thank you for, oh, of course. Thank you all for tuning in today. We'll see you all very soon.